you did 4 cycles, and there's a lot of rowers today that stay generational. You know, they go 3 cycles, 4 cycles. I'm wondering, what do you do differently at the last cycle versus the first cycle? What are you doing differently as a human being? Because you're aging, right? You're getting older, you're getting slower. How are you able to maintain top level speed over 4 cycles of Olympics? Who would have won? Redgrave and Pinsent in their prime, or Murray and Bond in their prime?
You guys would love it. We'd love it. The Germans would enter. It would be, we'd have 10 crews the next day.
I'm Alex Del Soro of the Rowers Choice Network, and you're not here to listen to me talk. I know it. Everyone knows it because you see the name on the screen. It is Sir Matthew Pinsent, and we're talking Olympics. Now, this guy, I don't know, if you're a rower, you know who the hell the guy is. I mean, he's incredible. He has an incredible history, and he's out of the boat now. He is not racing. He's in his 50s, but that's okay because we're here to talk about rowing. Yes, yes. And we're going to get into that. So, Sir Matthew, I know that is the formal way of saying it. Thank you for being here today.
Pleasure. I'm excited to do it.
So this is so cool. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I watched you row, and I wouldn't say, because you were a Brit, right? So us Americans, I wasn't looking to you as like the leader, like, oh, I got to get after that guy. I was more of like a Brian Volpenheim kind of guy, right? So, anyway, my first question I always ask everybody before we get into Olympics is, how old were you and where were you when you took that first stroke?
A proper rowing boat. I was at school. I went to Eton. They have ever had a huge rowing tradition. So I must have been 13, nice summer's day out in a single scull, wobbly as hell, lasted about, 6 or 7 strokes, and then went for a swim, like a good start, or as good a start as anyone could hope for.
So now everyone knows, now that we got that out of the way, I mean, everyone knows your career, a whole lot of gold medals, a whole lot of Olympic racing. So my first question, you're again, age is age. You're in your 50s. I think you just turned 50.
Yeah.
You have been through the Olympic cycles more times than I can even imagine. You're there in Tokyo. Do you miss it? I mean, do you miss it? Do you miss having those butterflies in your belly and training and racing?
No. And if ever I was going to miss it, it would have been 2008, the first summer games that I stepped back and sort of onto the other side of the experience, from the athlete village out into a hotel, from one side of the camera to the other. And I was totally relaxed then. And I've been to every summer games since then, doing rowing and other things. And I don't miss it. I don't miss the stress. I don't miss the feeling of this being the culmination of 4 years of work in the next 6 minutes. That's pretty intense, and it's something I don't really want back in my life. But I miss the people, but it's fine because it's not as if the guys I rowed with are out there in boats and I'm the only one not. We've all moved on and done other things with our life. And if we want to get together and go over old races, we can. So, there are certain things about it that I miss, but definitely the racing and the stress and the intensity of the Olympics is not something I want back. No.
So I'm going to get into the stress in a minute, but one of the questions someone had asked me to ask you is, do you still get in a boat? Do you still row for pleasure? Do you still row for training, or have you been out of it for a while?
There's a mix. I do a bit of, in fact, actually lockdown has really helped. We've done some stuff in the UK literally on Zoom Ergos.
Yeah.
And we get on and we have someone lead the session, and it's nothing more than a collection of keen people, lots of different ages, and we're all doing, it might be 4 8-minutes or 2 10s or something. That's been more regular rowing specific exercise than I've had for a while. In the boat, I definitely can. There's a group, sort of vets group, masters group, who based out of Molesey in the UK, and there's about 60 of us on an email list or a WhatsApp group, and there's definitely a central core of that group who are out every weekend, and I'm not part of that. I'm very happy to be more relaxed than that, but no, it's good. Listen, it's right where I want it. I'm very happy with what I do.
That's that's actually a relief. I like to hear that. But you're still at it. It's a sport of a lifetime. It's a lifetime sport. So us Americans, we care deeply about the 8. I mean, it is everything to us. I want to know your predictions. And give me, what do you think is the top 3 for the men and women coming into Tokyo this coming week?
I think I'm really keen to see the American men's 8, see where that's at. I think the real race at the moment has been dominated by Britain and Germany. They've been toe-to-toe all season. Yep. It's not unheard of that something else can upset that. I've seen that lots of times before, where you think there are 2 runaway favorites, and then there's another boat that comes in and either blows them away or gets involved in that mix. About the American men, I don't know. I think they're an unknown quantity for me. The women, I'm much more confident on your behalf. I think they're still the front runners, even though the field hasn't been together for 2 years. Whether that turns out into gold medal, I'm pretty sure that the women will win. I'm pretty sure that your men will not. How about that as a prediction?
Pretty sure they're not going to. So aside from the American men, there's this one crew, Matthew, that you have Hamish Bond jumping into the 8, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, a guy like you that have done the pair, the 4, can a guy like that provide enough power and speed into an 8, transition 8, and still be successful? Because I'm thinking that they're going to be fast.
It's diluted 8 times. That's the problem. And so,
yeah.
One individual in an 8 it's tricky. In a smaller boat, if they were absolutely at the peak of their powers, then you'd say, that's someone who can really make the boat sing almost on their own. They can bring a lot of motivation, but 8s are always complicated. They're so big that you can get into a really positive spiral and be going really quickly, or you can get into a really negative spiral and be going the other way. And so again, the difficulty we all have, doing our research running into these games is, where have these guys raced? Like, what form have we got? When was the last time that the US, full boat went up against anybody else? It's like, it's really tough to pitch exactly what's going to happen. There have been some that have been locked down, sort of locked away and training away, in their own countries. There are some that have been locked down and for months on end couldn't do any water work. There are some that have raced and some that are just been completely missing from any racing that's been going on in the last 18 months. So it's really difficult to pick.
That's a heck of a way to answer that question. I like that you said it's diluted 8 times. Now, a question. This is touching on your ego here a little bit. Yeah. All my friends, and the guys that I rode with, have always wondered who would have won, Redgrave and Pinsent in their prime, or Murray and Bond in their prime. Okay. I gotta know, could you have taken down those monsters?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I looked at the way they raced, particularly early on. I'm trying to think of when they first sort of came onto the scene, like 2008, 2009, and it was like, I looked at the way they raced and I couldn't figure out how they were making the pair go so quick.
Wow.
And then you just look at the way they start the race, and it was almost like their first and the second 500, there was a very small gap, a drop in speed, and then it was just like this inexorable stride and power through the middle. Their rhythm just looked amazing. And they'd get themselves into a position where with 500 meters to go, it was sort of beyond everybody else to chase them down. And Steve and I raced very differently. We would race very hard, very early on. We wouldn't hold back. We'd get ourselves out into a somewhat of a lead, and then try and control the race with much less finesse, I would say, than those guys did. And I think we would have really been in trouble because I think we might have been, even if we ignore the times. I mean, the stopwatch says they're quicker and by a margin. I mean, they have, I'm guessing now, 6, 8, 10 times inside our quickest performance. So, wow. You know, the stopwatch says they're going to win. But even if somehow there was a matchup race and you ignore what the stopwatch they were capable of doing, I think we would have been perhaps close to them early on. But then as we look to drop into pace, they're just carrying on. They hit a boat speed seemingly after a minute, 45 seconds, that they hold all the way through the race. And I think that would have put us in trouble. I genuinely do. I spoke to Steve a lot about it on the Edge of Rowing Lakes, and it was only 2008, 9, 10 where it was like, would we have been able to beat these guys? And we'd have a discussion about it. And then by 2012, it was like, no, there's no. I mean, they rode in London. They rode a 6:07, 6:08 or something. I mean, that's just an ocean ahead of anything that we would have considered.
That's so interesting. You're bringing out the human side of this, that you and Steve would sit on the edge of the water, be like, could we beat these guys? Like, what an interesting conversation to have, right? Internally, you're like, wow, you're passing the torch. You're like, okay, well, these guys are it.
We would talk just as much about, how is it that the British team are producing so many quick boats, and it was a sort of idle thing, but it fundamentally it becomes a redundant conversation, and even by that, you're already beginning to say, oh well, you're taking it for granted that we would have beaten the preeminent pairs of the early 80s or the 70s, the Langvoits or the Pimenovs or some of the other Aussie pairs that were around. It's just like, well, hang on. If we're gonna try and fudge the margins and say, oh yeah, but we've got to ignore the clock and just say, toe to toe, would we have been quick? It's like, well, it's not actually fair. You only race the people of your generation. You can only beat who shows up, and yeah. Thank goodness, they weren't around at the time that we were trying to do our thing.
For I don't know if you get a lot of, if you watch on Netflix, but or ESPN, but the Michael Jordan documentary came out last year, and it was just, we could not stop talking about the GOAT, right? The idea that, could Michael Jordan beat LeBron James? Could he beat and that's why I had to bring up this question, because it's just perfect timing.
There's a whole subtext on that. I've watched that documentary start to finish twice, and the first time I was like, it's borderline abusive. Like I was convinced I genuinely think, there are elements of his behavior that I think are bullying and controlling, and you just think that is not an environment that I would want to perform in. And it's like, it's amazing to me that there were teammates who, he was given basically control over the whole system. He could hire and fire people, arguably even the coach. That was just extraordinary to me, coming from a rowing background, where it's like, well, no athlete gets that. Zero, absolutely. There's no chance. And a crew boat, no way, it wouldn't work. So it's a subtext.
But do you think the sport needs a little bit of that? I mean, because it really, he changed the game. He changed the sport. Do we need something like that?
Maybe. I think there's a degree to which the sport could embrace that. There's a degree to which we need a revolution in the sport. That's a whole other topic. We don't innovate as rowing, certainly international rowing. The distance has always seemingly been 2,000 meters. It's always seemingly 6 across. We don't tend to mix that at all. And I mean, this is a big topic, but
It's a huge topic.
It's a huge topic. But you know, we set our stall out at the biggest event at the games, and we say you have to build us a 2,000 meter 6-lane course. That's what we require, and there is no discussion. And that to me is weird, you know, like, and with events, like, we change, but at such slow speed. Like, lightweights came in, but that was 30 years ago, and now they're looking like they're going out. Coastal looks like an innovation, and I'm really glad to see it. I want to see it come, and that would be great. But, like, you know, there are very, very few sports that have the same mix of events and disciplines basically from the start of their Olympic history, and we're one of them. And that to me is okay. You know, look at swimming, look at athletics, look at triathlon. They're all doing mixed, and rowing is just like, no, we don't do mixed. It would be easy for us. You just say, do you know what? Next World Championships is going to be a mixed 8, 4 men, 4 women. You guys sort it out. Let's see what happens. Everyone would go, that's crazy, but you know what? Well, let's try it. You guys would love it. We'd love it. The Germans would enter. It would be, we'd have 10 crews the next day. Anyway, again, a huge topic, a huge diversion, but it does worry me that in the fullness of time, you get judged as an Olympic sport on your popularity, on your box office appeal, on your ticket sales, on TV numbers, social media, all the rest of it. And to me, you know, we've got to ask ourselves, look, how much are we driving any of those with innovation or new ideas, or here's something, you know, here's why to watch rowing. You know, that's a big earthy question for Jean-Christophe to wrestle with, and not the only one either.
You know, I know your connection to Henley. Like, I raced Henley in 2016. You guys have done something that I think truly changed the sport. It's unbelievable, like the exposure. However, I feel like every damn rower in the world is saying the exact same thing. We need a revolution. And it's like, no one's doing anything about it, right? Like, the Olympics are coming. It's on primetime NBC in America. So, like, we're going to be watching it from 7 p.m. to 11. And I know that it's going to come and go. And people will talk about it for like a week, and then they won't talk about it again. And you're right. Changing it is the way to go. I don't want to get too deep into that. So I wanted to ask you, you're in, because I could talk to you for 2 hours, but we don't want to do that. So you brought up something earlier. You said we don't have a lot of history on athletes racing, right? So we don't know what we don't know. Are there standouts that you have seen, or that you're expecting to be standouts that we might not necessarily know? Like, is there a crew? Is there a country that you're going to say, man, they're going to kill it this year? I'm excited to see it. Or is it going to be the same old 3 or 4 countries that just do well?
That's a good question. I think the only one that I think could be a complete out of the blue could be the women's single. The Russian Katzen in the women's single. She looks outstanding from her form at the European Championships. She obviously qualified, you know, for the games. It looks, you know, that looks to me like, okay, there's someone who has exploded onto the scene who wasn't here in 2019 World Championships, where we all waved goodbye and said, right, see you next year. This is going to be really exciting. That's the one I think that I could say that, you know, if I'm going to be sifting through the result sheets from the heats, that's the one boat I want to see. Right, how did she get on?
Cool.
Yeah,
I didn't expect that. I got 2 more questions.
Okay.
One's a little bit longer than the other. So the GB men's 4 is going after the 6th gold, I think, in a row, if that's right.
Yeah.
As a British man, is it possible? I mean, can they? It's possible, but do you think they will do it? Do you think that that's a likely scenario?
I think the gap has helped them. I think they're in better shape now versus the rest of the world than they were in 19. which is pretty amazing even saying that. So it looks like, you know, they've had a good lockdown, whatever that meant, you know, training on rowing machines in their backyards or on their kitchens or whatever they did. So it looks like they've done well. The Olympics is different, and none of them have been to the Olympics before. So that's different about this crew before. So every time before, from one generation to the next, we've always had one, maybe two people who have held over from the previous incarnation. And, you know, the 2016 boat is history. These guys are making their Olympic debut. And what I also like is that, you know, what they say is they're trying to make their own piece of history, which I really like as well, because it shouldn't hang over them, because it begins to get like, you know, begins to get too much. You're just like, you know, does a race that happened literally more than 2 decades ago have any relevance to the start line in Tokyo?
Yeah.
No, just, you know, forget it. It's pointless even baking that in. It just is, it's silly. So in some ways I want us to move past it, and I want them to do well. I'd love it if they win a gold medal, but they have to make their own chapter and their own piece of history in their own way.
You lead me to my final question, Sir Matthew Pinsent.
Okay.
And it's a perfect, what you just said is perfect. So you did 4 cycles, and there's a lot of rowers today that stay generational. You know, they go 3 cycles, 4 cycles. I'm wondering, what do you do differently at the last cycle versus the first cycle? What are you doing differently as a human being? Because you're aging, right? You're getting older, you're getting slower. How are you able to maintain top level speed over 4 cycles of Olympics?
Because certainly what I saw Steve do, and then what I emulated, and what I reckon is the only way of doing it, is you pick your battles. You as a 20-something-year-old, 1-year-old arriving on the team, you're excited, you're in national kit for the first time, you're in a training environment where everyone has been to the Olympics or certainly is going to be going. And you're just like, you cut into every training session, every chance you get to impress someone, every weight session, every ergo, every little warm-up run, like whatever it is, you're there. You are going to be, you're living the I'm here early, I'm finishing late sort of scenario. You want to be the Michael Jordan, you know, character who's in the gym, you know, long after everyone else is going home practicing your 3-pointers. I think by the end, 3-4 cycles in, you realize, well, first of all, my body's not going to react to that in the same way. I might pick up an injury if I carry on pushing that level. And so you pick your battles. You decide, right, okay, well, ergo test, whatever that is, 2K might be springtime of Olympic year. That's a really important day. I want to make sure that I produce a good performance that day. Of course, Olympic trials, that's a big moment. Racing with the crew in the run up to the Olympics, those are big. And of course, the Olympics are big. In between, does it really matter that you win the speed order on a wet Thursday morning where there's 4 times 2K and they're going to be limited rate 28 and there's going to be a couple more tomorrow? Not really. And so, you know, you don't produce your sparkling A game on that morning. It doesn't mean you don't learn something. Doesn't mean you don't train hard. Doesn't mean you're not preparing the best way that you can for the Olympics. But you pick your battles. That would be my guess at the way of doing it at 30 plus compared to 21.
That's that's a really good way to putting it. And we watched again the Michael Jordan documentary. You saw that, right? He changed his game. He went from being the showboat nonstop to then being one of the highest passers on the team, right? Like he handed off the ball when needed, and he picked his battles. You're right, he picked his battles.
Maybe he finally became a team player towards the end. He finally figured it out.
That was it. I have had a wonderful time. Thank you for doing this and this quick interview. And everyone watching and tuning in, we'll be doing more of this throughout the entire week of the Olympics. We'll be meeting with, I think CJ has found us 7 Olympians to talk about what it's like on race day. More from us here at Rowers Choice.